cold open question of the day for July 22nd of the Just Basketball Show. Chris Manning, Brendon Kleen, and Wes Goldberg with you today. Guys, there's a film out called Twisters, and I just want to ask you this. Which NBA player, or WNBA player if you have someone that fits this better, would be the best storm chaser?
I'm going to go De'Aaron Fox because he might be the fastest player in the league, and if you have to run after something, then I'll go with the fast guy.
That's
this is a really strange question.
I don't think they're doing it on foot.
I was just trying to give you an answer.
Okay, yeah, Wes, I'm just picturing De'Aaron Fox being in Oklahoma, being on the ground chasing a tornado, and him being really fast. But it's like the tornado's moving hundreds of miles an hour, Wes. I don't think De'Aaron Fox is that fast.
I don't know. I guess we'll find out.
I'm going to go Russell Westbrook. More tapped into everything related to a major weather system of thunder than anyone we've had come through the league. So
knows the
equally
roads
corny
in Oklahoma City.
as Wes's answer. Yeah, also perfect place to be. Obviously, that's why the team's named that. So he seems like he has it all figured out. He kind of gets what would be needed in that type of a profession.
Here's the three names that come to mind for me for different reasons. Number one, Robin Lopez, just being into this because it's weird and like something he picks up as a hobby. Could totally see it. Could buy it. And he's nerd, and like you have to be like kind of nerdy in some ways to do this. This isn't just like you just do this for fun. You kind of have to have like a scientific part to it. Number two, I could just see Alex Caruso being good at this. He's from Texas. I could just see him like chasing these down in a pickup truck. Number three, Jimmy Butler. If you told me Jimmy Butler just one summer picked up a storm chasing habit, and I would buy it. Would not be
also
surprised.
from Texas.
Also from Texas. He's into country music and cowboy boots. Like he's already kind of like halfway there.
Jimmy Butler would just be like, I am now the best storm chaser ever. Now, he would immediately become the most famous one.
From April 15th to June 22nd is the range though. It's like no other time of the year.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Off-season stuff.
I think the real answer is whoever's the smartest NBA player, whichever one has like committed has been in school the longest, is like maybe the best answer. I could see like also Spo being like weirdly into this, just like as a competitive thing, but I don't know if he has hobbies outside of basketball.
He doesn't. Eric Spoelstra and I are very similar in that way.
Well, Wes, you saw a movie.
Yeah.
I did. I have seen one movie now this year.
Tell us more ways that you're similar to Spo.
That's pretty much it.
Okay, great. Okay. We got to the end of the list.
Does he own a Marlins hat? Like you got to just find like.
We both actually, our favorite Jordan is the same Jordan.
Which is what?
I think that's the Jordan 3. The Jordan 3s. That's his favorite, and that's my favorite Jordan. I have one pair that I never wear, and he has several pairs that he always wears. But we do agree that Jordan 3 is the best Jordan. So there's two ways that me and Spoelstra are similar. We also both listen to the same podcast.
The Just Basketball Show?
Exactly.
Okay. I'm assuming it's going to – I don't even want to know. I don't even wondering what it is. Is it what this
Joe Rogan.
Is? Oh, yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
Okay.
You and just millions of other people, I mean.
Yeah, Spotify. Yeah. No, who? All right, coming up on today's show, we got 3 more takes for you. Western Conference Offseason Edition, and we're going to get a little story time from Brendon Kleen from his weekend with WNBA All-Star Weekend on Phoenix. That's coming up today on the Just Basketball Show.
Oh, a spectacular move by Michael Jordan. LeBron James with no regard for human life.
Hey there, welcome into the Just Basketball Show for Monday, July 22nd. I'm Chris Manning. Wes Goldberg is here. Brendon Kleen is here. And we are your 3 times a week usually basketball show covering all things hoops. That's NBA, WNBA, props, draft, trades, all of that and more. I want to tell you that support for today's episode of the Just Basketball Show comes from BetMGM. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code JustBasketball, and you'll get up to $1,500 on a first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. Step 1. Download BetMGM Sportsbook app on iOS or Android and sign up using code JustBasketball. Step 2, deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game. Step 3, you receive up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if the bet loses. Just make sure to use bonus code JustBasketball when you sign up. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Must be 21 or older to wager. Terms and conditions apply. All right, guys, we have takes. We did this with the East last week where we said if we were higher or lower than the consensus on certain teams, we ran through them. We're going to do the same thing here with the Western Conference. I did not randomize these today like last time, but if maybe the way we should do this is, does anyone want to? I'm going to offer it up to the floor. Does anyone want to start, or should I start by default as I'm hosting?
I can start.
All right, Brendon, let's cook.
So the Dallas Mavericks are a team that a lot of people talked about. Both of the past 2 off seasons have been in the news almost every off season. They're very busy. Mark Cuban was doing everything. Now he's not in charge. There's no shortage of news around Dallas, and they were just in the finals. And that's kind of why they're actually my team today, what my take is actually focused on. I think the Dallas Mavericks are have the best front office for this moment of NBA team building. I think that they've proven that. Well, let's cover what that even means, right? I mean, I think it's trades, it's extensions, and they've had the double challenge, kind of a little bit of the previous era of this, like, oh wow, our guys are good, all these guys are good right away kind of moment, and the pressure of the who's going to leave, the disgruntled star kind of forcing trades thing that was kind of like pre-COVID. And then since then, with the tightened cap rules and the increased movement of like role player types and picks being thrown around, they've just been relentless in churning through this roster, understanding that they have an MVP candidate on their hands, somebody absolutely good enough to take you over the mountain and win a championship in Luka Doncic. You can go all the way back to the Porzingis trade where they kind of guessed wrong on who, but they understood the timing needed to be now, all the way to getting what I think we probably should revisit as a pretty great value on the Kyrie Irving contract last summer. The several moves that they made to get Grant Williams and turn that into PJ Washington, and then turn Josh Green into basically Klay Thompson, and then they get off the Tim Hardaway thing and they get Quentin Grimes, and it just feels like they always are doing something. And at the end of it, I always zoom out and I'm like, yeah, kind of like that move, kind of like that offseason, kind of like that stretch of time. And obviously the results on the court have proven it. So I just think this summer with the Klay addition and the other things that they did, even back to the deadline, are just reinforcing that they're really nailing what you how nimble and creative you have to be right now to build a great team and keep building a great team in the NBA.
If I could poke holes in your argument, I would poke 2 holes in it. In terms of the Mavericks having the best front office for this time, they let the Jalen Brunson thing, they botched that a little bit. Now, I'll give them credit. They learned from it, and that was very important. It's almost as important as anything else.
Well,
but they got a little lucky that Kyrie Irving became available there, and they were able to get him for basically nothing.
I don't know how to draw the lines on this exactly, but the front office thing to me feels like with Brunson, there's something with the Mark Cuban component of that I think kind of complicates that, and I feel like the Nico Harrison era feels like a little more put together.
That's fair.
I think Brunson left because he wanted to go to the Knicks.
Also,
that's also a big part of it, but they kind of screwed up. I do think that the front office has done an awesome job, but I would just say if you were kind of playing devil's advocate, this is the things that you would point to. And the other thing is, it's really easy to look really smart when you have Luka Doncic. He just makes everything so easy. But I do give them a lot of credit. They said, okay, we need rim rollers because we have Luka Doncic. Let's go out and get not 1, but 2 of them in basically 6 months. Daniel Gafford and obviously drafting Lively there. I also think they've crushed the minimum signings, like the Derrick Jones Jr. thing. These other guys that they've brought in, Dante Exum, and they let Derrick Jones Jr. go. They bring in Najee Marshall. They bring in Najee Marshall, who's I think an awesome fit for that team, and maybe a little bit more versatile than Derrick Jones Jr. And they can kind of get into some other interesting lineups with him. I love a quiet move that they did this offseason is getting Quentin Grimes in the Tim Hardaway salary dump, which I like Grimes as a player. If he could stay healthy, I think that could be a really important, useful player for them, especially within that Luka Doncic sort of universe and that ecosystem. So, Brendon, I generally do agree with you, but I just wanted to point out in the name of fairness, just some of it hasn't been 100%,
no,
home runs.
It hasn't. But I think what I love about how they've been able to operate is that they're always doing 2 things at once.
Yes.
It's like they the degree to which they won the Derek Lively trade is absolutely like unbelievable. They got rid of Davis Bertans, who was a nothing contract, a player that they got back for having to dump Porzingis, and got the better player.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they, like you said, with Grimes, they dump Hardaway, but somehow they're getting a player a lot of people like more than Hardaway.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then the Grant Williams sign and trade, they use that. They buy their pick back from OKC, and then they end up getting PJ Washington. And, you know, they've also drafted really well. You know, it's one thing to, like, make the Lively trade, but you got to get that player right, and they did that. They turned, Josh Green into somebody, and I know Mavs fans, Josh Green could have been Desmond Bane, and, like, there's always those what-ifs. But Josh Green in the 20s is a perfectly good value to get. Mm-hmm. Jaden Hardy in the second round, to have him even be anything as a rotation player is nice. Max Prosper, who, we'll probably see a little bit more of this year. It's just hard to really look at any aspect outside of losing Brunson, which, you can't fully flush that down the toilet, but they now have made it further without Brunson than they did with him, so they at least overcame it. It's just hard to point to anything that they're doing wrong. And then on top of just making the finals, they have a better, deeper team now heading into this upcoming season. And there's still $3 million under the first apron and $13 million under the second apron. So they're still flexible. You would think a team that has had to make so many moves and been so all in for 5-6 years now with Luka would be capped out, no picks, nothing. But they're not even in that situation. They still can kind of continue to be nimble. So I'm jealous. I'm jealous as a not Mavs fan that the Mavs have been able to pull this off.
Well, go ahead, Chris.
No, I just think they've hit things on. I think the margins thing, is the biggest thing I would say, Brendon. I think that is in favor of your argument, because this with the Sun stuff. We see this with every team every year, that these teams are trying to find useful players on really cheap contracts via the draft and via the margins. The guys they hit on last year that were really helpful for them on the margins both worked out. Derrick Jones Jr. obviously played so well for them that he got paid and went elsewhere, and they had to pivot and move to another direction. But they got the most out of Derrick Jones Jr. than any team has ever gotten. They scouted him well, understood him, and put him into a role that succeeded. They also hit on Dante Exum. Dante Exum was a former high draft pick, had a lot of injury concerns, goes overseas. They bring him back, and that was an effective role player for them. It filled in well as a starter, was like 17-5 when he started, was a guy that could play for them, I think, in the playoffs as it went deep. Seth Curry even ate some minutes for them for a time being. Like, they did work on the edges, and even when they missed on the Grant Williams thing last summer and had to pivot off of that, they were willing to do that. So, like, all of that to me adds up to I love this take, because I think they're doing all the stuff that the previous versions of Dallas's front office did not do well. They are hitting the stuff that Dallas was previously bad at, and it's making this team a lot better.
Part of this is also timing. Also, they got Derrick Jones Jr. at the right time. They got Dante Exum at the right time, where Exum he had overcome some of those injuries. He had kind of humbled himself in Europe and started developing more of a three-point shot and stuff. They got him at the right time. They get Derrick Jones Jr. at the right time when he's not making $16 million a year and is overpaid, but he's actually still basically the same player, but now underpaid and exceeding expectations because he was making a minimum last year. You can argue that they might be doing the same thing right now with Marshall, with Quentin Grimes, who they kind of got on the scrap heap. He had higher value 2 years ago when he was playing for the Knicks than he did coming off of last year with the Pistons. So part of this is timing. If I can add one other thing that the front office has done well, even though Brendon looked like you wanted to say something.
No, I just think that those marginal moves that Chris was talking about and some of the timing that you're talking about, that is where I feel like having Luka is a cheat code, right? Because
yes,
Luka can make Derrick Jones Jr. look good, whereas if he was on the Pistons with Cade as his best player, or the Rockets with Jalen Green a few years ago, no one would have been saying, "Nice signing, Derrick Jones really worked out." It's so that is where they get it, but they've also nailed the guys who make Luka better. So it's kind of everywhere. But what else? Tell me more reasons that I'm right about this take, Wes. That's what I want to hear.
Well, beyond just sort of like the nailing of the Excel spreadsheet part of all of this that the front office has to do. It seems like a good building. Everybody seems to be in a good mood there. Everybody's empowering, and this is sort of going back to Luka. Luka has that power to empower players on the court, but he gets along with Kyrie Irving. Kyrie Irving has been very famously not an issue in Dallas the way that he was an issue in Brooklyn and things like that off the court. And the front office, as sort of the guiding light for everything, in terms of messaging, in terms of putting a good workplace environment in place, they have done a really good job of that, right? It feels like everybody enjoys going to work. Everybody likes working for Nico Harrison. And that's a really big part of a front office's job that I think gets really under-discussed, because when you have a guy like Derrick Jones Jr. and Dante Exum coming in and trying to resurrect their NBA lives, it helps to have Luka. It also helps to be in that kind of workplace environment. And the front office deserves a ton of credit for that too.
It's too small to make it part of some trend, but I am interested and curious about the outside of the box, outside of the industry way that they hired Harrison. Mm-hmm. It's easy to say everybody like, oh, well, they took the Nike guy, go find the Adidas guy. Like, how do you really replicate, what they did there? But I think like, Bob Myers, I think Rob Pelinka's tenure on the whole is probably more good than bad, but maybe people think that's stupid. I don't know. But I think between agents and kind of like industry people and whatever, you probably can find somebody good if you're willing to establish a relationship and take a chance on somebody that is not just the assistant GM in whatever other organization that you've been, watching develop from afar. But, it's probably also not a coincidence that the Lakers, Warriors, and Mavs were the teams that could take those chances because they had a little bit more structural like stability with ownership and everything else. The Hornets probably can't go out and do that the same way the Mavs could with Cuban, but it works if you get it right. It can really pay off.
I would say like too, it's probably somewhat based on the owners. Like Cuban, we know he's a very well established public figure and all this stuff, but that is someone who, he doesn't technically like own the team anymore. Like that's the other part of this, which is interesting, but. Mm-hmm. He was he's a guy whose whole part of his whole brand is really being outside and innovative and doing this stuff and giving someone like this the reign to do some of that. Like, to his credit, that's a real plus. That was a real plus for him as an owner. You wouldn't see someone like Herb Simon doing this. You wouldn't see like these more traditional old school owners do something like this. Cuban's whole thing is really outside the box solutions, and he did something. And Harrison, like, the PJ Washington thing, he flamed out in the finals, but like the whole story that they have talked about and sold on getting Washington was that Harrison knew him for such a long time that he knew there was more there that they could tap into. So they went for it. And there's something to those relationships only come when you hire people who haven't spent their whole career working their way up the NBA front office ladder.
I think we're looking a little bit too much into the resume part of their backgrounds and not at the people. Like, if you want to take Bob Myers and Nico Harrison as examples, I think they're great examples of great GMs over this last decade.
I would also throw Leon Rose in there while we're talking about this category. He's done a good job.
I think what they have in common is that they're really good at the interpersonal stuff, right? Like, Nico Harrison taking chances on, and that's sort of become his brand. I believed in Kyrie Irving. I believed in PJ Washington. I believed in Dante Exum when nobody else did. Players really respond to that kind of thing, and players really responded to Bob Myers. So, yeah, the Lakers tried to get a guy in Rob Pelinka who had the same background as Bob Myers, but he didn't become Bob Myers in terms, like, I don't think anybody is saying that Rob Pelinka, and I agree with you, Brendon, it's been he won a championship, but I don't think anybody's looking at him as sort of one of the top GMs in the league either, right? And where Bob Myers was pretty universally considered one of the best guys. That interpersonal stuff is so important, and it is something that gets under-discussed, and it really does guide the organization in a very meaningful way. When you have the right messaging, everybody's on the same page, everybody's sort of rowing in the same direction. That starts with that front office. So I think when you try to outsmart yourself and say, well, it worked for the Warriors, so let's go hire a former agent because that's the thing that worked for them. No, they got the right person, right? It didn't really matter what his job was, although all that stuff is important in terms of what the relationships in the league are and all these things. But if you're another team trying to copy what the Mavericks are doing, I wouldn't just go find the best guy at Nike or Adidas or Under Armour and just be like, you're our guy now. That's not the part of the formula that works.
Because you can also be good at that job and not be a good people person, right? So even saying, oh, well, because Nico Harrison came from Nike, that job means he was good with people. It's like, no, I think it's just that Nico Harrison seems to be able to connect.
Even if they're let's just go pull any outsider and buck the trend, and now I look really smart, or I think I'm smarter than everybody else. No. We kind of look at the wrong things there, and I think I'm not saying like I think like owners will look at the wrong thing and try to copy and paste what worked for another team, and they're just they're misinterpreting what worked for those other teams.
Well, it's the counterexample is Detroit, right? Arn Tellem's been running the Pistons for a few years, and no one talks about it because it's not working.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Harrison had the soft skills that actually translate to the job he needed, that he was going to get. And if you hire a finance guy from Nike just because he worked at Nike, might not have those same soft skills that make him a good general manager.
Can we get back? I have a on the court question because the Klay Thompson acquisition for Dallas was the big one, right? Obviously, and I think teams have been or people have been trying to figure out how they're going to do the lineups, their depth chart, and everything. Is Klay going to start or not? I don't know that just by getting Klay Thompson that over the Lakers or whatever that they've guaranteed him a starting job. I actually don't think they're going to start Klay Thompson. I think they're going to start Luka, Kyrie, Marshall in the Derrick Jones Jr. spot, Washington, and probably Lively, I'm assuming, is going to be the full-time starter. And then you have Klay coming off the bench. I think Klay can close a lot of games. And then Brendon, I'll throw to you about this, but I understand the defensive concerns, and I think they'd be very real if you were starting with Klay Thompson because now you're asking for a big bulk of your minutes to be Luka, Kyrie, and Klay on the floor together. It's going to be hard to stop teams. But I think they can all three of those guys can turn it up a notch for like the final 3 or 4 minutes of a game if they're on the court. That defensively and at the close of a game, if you're sort of, again, turning those dials over for the last 3 minutes, I think they can deliver on that in a way that they wouldn't be able to at the start of a game when you're being asked to do it for a bulk of the game, obviously.
Yeah, I've talked myself into the Klay move by, I guess, convincing myself that he's okay with maybe not starting or closing every night because I think that's the best way that it'll work. But Luka has never had a shooter like this. So if you are just treating him as kind of a mercenary go get buckets off the bench, and if you're hot or we don't need a great defender that night, you can close option, then he's going to be great in that. And it's a huge improvement for something that they didn't have. But we're also talking about, right, like Najee Marshall, basketball, NBA nerds like him. We don't know if he's a starting player on somebody who wants to win a championship, right? We talked about Grimes already. There's a question mark. Omax Prosper, we literally have seen nothing. Jaden Hardy, I think, until his mentality shifts when he's out there, he can't just be a bucket getter. Like, he's probably not a starter right now and maybe won't be. So, but I think it's a testament. This was similar last year. Jason Kidd figured this out, right? Like, Grant Williams was starting, then he wasn't, then Derrick Jones was, and then Exum fluctuated. Right. I think, we all agree they maybe should have played Exum even more, but he figured this out last year, and I think he can do that again, and I think that's another benefit to their structure is they can roll into the fall with, okay, Luka, Kyrie, Lively, what else? And I think you kind of have to trust them at this point that they're going to peak out at whatever version of it that they're going to find.
There does seem to be a little bit of excitement about Omax Prosper on the ground in Dallas, too. So that's a guy in his second year that might fill some of those minutes that they lost with Derrick Jones Jr. leaving. So I'm with you. They don't have to do whatever they start opening night does not have to be the starter in their last game of the season. That doesn't have to be their starting lineup. But all of that is to say, I don't think Klay Thompson is in pen in that starting lineup either. I think they're going to have some options here. Yeah, that's where I'm at with Dallas.
Okay. I love this. Let's go to me next because I think geographically we'll hit it this way.
That's how you do podcasts.
I think about geography, when I think about podcasts more than anything else. The Oklahoma City Thunder are the team with the highest upside in the NBA next year. And I don't think there's a team that I think comes close as far as upside. You think about, even if they just ran it back, this is a team that was the top team in the West last year. Okay, so you have that going for you already. You won 57 games as a still pretty young team. Didn't get as far as you wanted in the playoffs, but it makes sense as a young team. But coming off a 57-win season, you would think, okay, Chet year 2, another year of Shea, J-Dub gets a year better, etc. Like, you think there's just growth coming naturally. They have done the smart thing, and I think the right thing, in throwing gas on the fire of this team. You go get Alex Caruso, and you go get Isaiah Hartenstein. You re-sign some of your role guys, like Wiggins and whatnot. And this roster is deep. This roster is still young and ready to grow. I think 60-plus wins is very much on the table for this Thunder team. I would have them as at least in the regular season, the favorite to be the 1 seed next year. And I think there's a chance when we get to June next year, that we look back and say that the Oklahoma City Thunder ended up being the best team in the league by some kind of margin. I think it's fully on I think anything at their ceiling is on the table for the Thunder next year.
I don't disagree with the take. I will say, great injury luck last season for the Thunder. is that going to repeat 2 years in a row? Would be my major question, at least in the regular season. In terms of their ceiling, yeah, I don't think there's any debate that this team has a championship ceiling. To me, and I think I've made this comparison before, but they just remind me of that straight-A student who came home from school, did his homework right away so that he could just play video games all night. That's exactly what the Thunder did. So they just started the offseason before the draft. They went out and did a double whammy move. They got rid of Josh Giddey, brought in Alex Caruso. Awesome. They allocated the money for Isaiah Hartenstein, did it, got the guy that they wanted, signed him to the perfect contract, declining on the team option in the third year. Does not interfere. They overpaid him, and they don't care, right? Because it doesn't matter. Because by the time these major extensions are gonna kick in, he could be off the books, and they'll be free of that.
Yeah, who gets the name for that kind of contract? Is it the Fred VanVleet special, or is it the Isaiah Hartenstein special? Because they both got it in back-to-back years where it's kind of non-guaranteed on the end, but it looks really awesome when it gets tweeted out. You're like well paid as hell, but then it fades, and then you're going to be on another team.
Yeah.
Maybe by the time your team's actually good.
I like the VanVleet. He was first, right? So
He pioneered
He
it.
put it in vogue, and it would be kind of cool to be like, oh, I just got VanVleeted. It sounds
It's
better
a
than
cooler
being
name,
Hartenstein.
although they're both
Yeah,
pretty cool names. I mean,
They are. One's easier to pronounce.
that's true. It's good branding.
So you got VanVleet.
Yeah. I think that's right, though. I mean, the only thing I don't like about Oklahoma City's offseason, which won't matter until the spring, probably, is it was making me think when you said you were going to talk OKC, Chris, that it feels similar to where I was with the Magic when we did the East, where I'm like, they doubled down on what their identity was, but they still have weak points. The similarity, though, and what you guys push back on with Orlando, which you could say with Oklahoma City, is, well, they're really young, so we might not really know what their weaknesses are. Maybe that actually is a moving target, and Chet and J-Dub get a lot better, and they go into next year's playoffs with much more secondary offense next to Shea, and they added some guys who, can probably be better role players offensively. Maybe the shooting was just real, and a lot of these guys that took a step forward like Dort are just good shooters now, and that sticks, and this team did solve its problems. But I would have liked it if they got some different types of players to make them to have more answers to different problems, but they also won 57 games and made it to Game 7 in the second round, so they didn't need to go crazy.
Yeah, and I would add this too. I think they have two guys on the roster that I still think there is a lot more that we're going to learn about them and what is possible with them in Chet and in J-Dub. And I think Chet in particular could be so many things still. I mean, we think about what he was as a prospect out of high school and then in college. Like, that's a guy who could put the ball on the floor. That's a guy who had like real offensive lead hub potential. And because of where he ended up and because of his injury, we haven't really fully seen that yet. He's kind of done a different version of that. But you're telling me that it's not possible that Chet can kind of be this differentiating kind of player in the way he plays that they maybe could use, but maybe it is already in-house. They just need to give Chet another year of NBA experience. Maybe with J-Dub, there's a leap to come here that also solves this. I think that's, to me, where I differentiate with the Magic, is that I think there are more internal options that we haven't uncovered yet, whereas I'm not saying Paolo and Franz, for instance, are finished products, but I think we more of kind of know what their style is going to be, and I think we kind of know what Jalen Suggs' style is going to be, and I think with Chet more than J-Dub at this point, I think there's a possibility that it becomes something that they don't have right now, and that kind of solves this gap we're going to see.
They're going to have to. They're going to have to, especially when it comes to Jalen Williams. He's going to have to be more of an on-ball, consistent creator because I know everybody hated Josh Giddey. The guy could dribble the ball, and in a way that Caruso can't, in a way that Hartenstein can't. Like, Caruso and Hartenstein were good additions, but they were safe. I don't think that there's any dismissing that. They didn't really take a swing at anything, I don't think, this year. And if you were going to poke holes in the roster, you would say, well, they rely a little bit too much on Shea, and if he's not playing like an MVP, everything kind of crumbles. There's a cascade effect that happens when he's off, and he's rarely off. But, that is sort of the weakness in the roster, unless Jalen Williams or Chet or somebody can kind of take on that role. And they're so young that I bet this whole offseason was a little bit more of a bet on Jalen Williams' future as an all-star kind of guy, as a multi-time all-star caliber player. And I like Jalen Williams. They're probably going to be right on that. But I do think that the Thunder got a benefit of, they got a little bit of a Q rating bonus because the two guys that they added were, NBA Twitter's favorite guys. If there was, an all-NBA Twitter team, Caruso and Hartenstein would have been on it for the last 2 years. And Sam Presti kind of nails it with that. But I also think that people were probably a little too low on Giddey, even if he wasn't the right fit for the roster. I don't think he's like a terrible player. And there's a little bit of a deficit in just straight up ball handling on this roster. But maybe, again, with Williams, Kason Wallace, some of the guys I've drafted, maybe that's where it
Wallace is the guy that I was going to say.
Yeah.
I mean, he was like a playmaker. He was a point guard basically in college, and they just turned him into like a power forward. They turned him into their Drew Holiday basically. But, you know, in terms of just who can bring the ball up the court and set up a set, he's an option. He just wasn't used that way last year. So I think they'll figure that out. I'm more worried about the shooting personally because I just don't really think that they improved on that. And the way that Dallas defended them was, we don't care about your shooters. And they didn't do anything to address that issue. So you're not only asking for like just sort of progress from your on-ball creators on this team, but also you're kind of holding them back is like a little bit extreme, but you're making it harder on them for sure with the way that you're assembling the other 4 guys or 3 guys around those lineups, you know. So, and you don't really want to turn Chet into some, you know, floor spacer solely because, like Chris said, he has potential to be more. So, I guess it's going to be a question of what are the roles of a lot of these young guys that are so versatile to kind of assemble the best full team, you know, because they're bringing in more guys like Caruso and Hartenstein now that are specialists. We know what they're going to do. So how do the other guys fill in around that, given that they're young and could go in any direction? I think that's going to be what's probably the most indicative of where OKC goes this year and the next few years.
I gotta stop doing this one thing with my hand because it makes me feel like I'm using my hand like a certain person. And I'll tell you guys after the show, but I think if all this clicks into place, this is kind of reinforces my point. I don't think if like, some of this is going to have to be luck and things figuring it out, and it might be a process. But I think if they like hit even 90-95% of all this stuff kind of works and they're relatively healthy, the only team I'm like looking up and down the conferences, the only other team that I feel like could hit the same levels of overall completeness is Boston. Like, I don't think there's another team that has the potential to be this covered in terms of defense, versatile play styles, different kinds of creators, pretty big. Like, I don't think there's another team in the West that when you look at it and say, okay, I don't have a question there. Like, there's just all these other teams have issues and concerns, and the Thunder have issues and concerns, but they can grow out of in a way I think no other team in the West can, and only really I think Boston is kind of roster-wise in the same space.
Everybody's credibly a two-way player on both the Boston and the Oklahoma City roster, and that's where every one of these teams kind of want to go. I think the 2019 Raptors really kind of put that into motion. You could argue that the Warriors did too, but they had like a million Hall of Famers on that team, and it's like not fair to compare anybody to that. But yeah, I mean, when you have a bunch of guys who could credibly do something on both ends of the court and not get picked on defensively, that the domino effect of that, I mean, it's just everything is just exponentially is easier for everybody on the roster when that's the case.
I'm trying to. So right now, title odds, BetMGM. They have the second best odds to win the title next year, plus 750.
Yeah.
Celtics are plus 310.
I think most people think of them as the best contender in the West, you know, for the reason you just said and how far they made it last year. And Shea's proven he can get it done. So, plus they're going to be a high seed. I mean, there's no floor there. I don't think so.
You think that's it? Which is, you know,
I mean,
guy that finished top 5 in MVP. But
what I could see him improving on would potentially be feel as a passer and a playmaker.
That's where
I don't think of him as some kind of genius passing guys open, seeing 3 steps ahead of the defense as a playmaker right now, and maybe just with age and how much gravity he bends defenses with as a scorer, he just
and he has the size,
sees those windows eventually, you know, in a way that he hasn't, or, you know, but I like people would say shooting and things like that. I kind of think his scoring style and his shot diet is just, that to me is pretty locked in.
Yeah, I think he's going to be that player. The only thing that you can add is just sort of XP points, right? It's like just keep getting seasoned, keep seeing the opportunities. Like eventually you just start seeing the patterns of basketball because you've seen it so many times. I'm with you. It would be the playmaking part of it. Because even if you, I think, you know, 34% from three-point range 2 years ago, 35% last year. Are we sold on him being like a 35% career three-point shooter? I'm not sold. But maybe he is. Maybe this is just where it's going. But he's never going to be a guy taking 8 3-pointers a game, right? That's not going to be his style.
You might want to see him as these other, as these other guys develop. Like, could he increase his spot up 3 volume?
Mm-hmm.
It's just not really something he's ever had to do a ton of. But
yeah, within the context of Oklahoma City, maybe there's an avenue for him to play off the ball a little bit more as these other guys sort of develop. Maybe that sort of unlocks another level of his game, the way like a young Dwayne Wade, right? Eventually played with LeBron, and then all of a sudden he was like one of the best off-ball cutters in the league. But we're talking about a guy 8 years into his career at that point, and Shea even at this point is not there, obviously. So the Thunder's a good pick, man. It makes sense why they're the number 1 option in the West. You said number 1 on BetMGM or number 2?
Yeah,
in the West?
they have the number 1 in the West. So I'll give you here's the West odds as of right now to win the title. Thunder are plus 750. Nuggets are plus 850. Mavs are plus 1100. The Wolves are plus 1100. The Lakers are then plus 3,000. The Grizzlies and Pelicans and Suns all plus 4,000.
So I know this is not how basketball works, but I'm going to ask this question anyway. Chris, do you think that the Thunder, where would you rank the Thunder's top 2 guys? And first, what is the Thunder's like top 2?
I mean,
it's Shea and is it Chet or is it J-Dub?
It's Shea and J-Dub right now, and it could be Shea and Chet in a year.
Where would they rank? And again, I know this is not how basketball works, but where would you rank that duo compared to the ones that you were just talking about in the West, whether it's Jokic and Murray, Anthony Edwards and Gobert, or Towns, or whatever it is in Minnesota, etc.?
I mean, I have Jokic Murray 1 because I think they're just so in sync, and like that is just like, if you want to talk about like, I mean, frankly, best duo in terms of synchronicity in the league and stuff, it's kind of them, Yep.
I think Minnesota's top 2 is better.
I'm debating. Are you doing Towns or Gobert?
Gobert.
I think it's close, though.
It's close.
I do think it is close.
It's close. If you want to go Oklahoma City, I have no problem with that.
I would go OKC over Minnesota, and then I think I might take them over the Dallas ones, even if I think Luka's the best player out of those 4. I think I would put J-Dub above
Over
Kyrie
Kyrie
right now. Yeah, just better
Still,
defender.
I think I put
bigger.
Dallas. I put Phoenix's top 2 over him. I put
Yeah, you got to be
Clippers top-
both.
You were
Yeah.
when you guys stopped bickering, I was gonna jump in there. So I'm glad you took care of
Bickering.
it for me.
the Lakers' top 2 is over them.
Yeah.
Sacramento's top 2 is over them. The point I'm saying here is that, and it kind of goes back to like sort of my point and my takeaway from the Thunder's offseason, it kind of set in concrete that they need Jalen Williams to hit another level pretty soon. And that's sort of the bet I think they were making this offseason. Or maybe it's Chet. It could definitely be like, okay, Jalen Williams is actually going to be our number 3 guy, and Chet is going to be the number 2. One of those guys kind of has to take it up a notch within the next couple of years for this, I think, for this team to be a real, like, for me to feel really good about picking them. I don't think I would pick Oklahoma City going into the season. I wouldn't be shocked if they won the championship, but they're probably not going to be my pick just because as good as they are, the formula for winning a title, I kind of need to know who that number 2 option is going to be. I would feel a lot safer, in other words, more comfortable making that pick if I knew really who that number 2 option was, and that number 2 option was of the we can win a championship with this guy number 2 option.
To be entirely
Chet
honest,
is a year
yeah.
younger than J-Dub too, just for keeping that in mind. I think he's the one who has way more of a ceiling to hit. It's just he's such a unique player. It's kind of almost hard to envision a little bit.
Yeah, it's not very many players ever that kind of do like him, which is like
He
sort
could
of
like absolute
hyperbole,
top
but-
ceiling. He could be better than Shea. I mean, that's his ceiling. There's a world. Yeah. So
Also, just good luck picking a team. We're it's July. I don't have to do this yet, but like picking who I'm gonna pick out of the West is just it's.
I feel pretty good
insane.
about the Kings right now.
Sabonis turns it around, defensively.
DeRozan, man, clutch.
Yeah, that's all you need. A real hooper, mid-range game.
They needed a hooper.
Yeah,
They need some hoopers in the West. They don't have enough.
not enough real hoopers. All right, Wes, you're up.
So last week we were all down on the 3 East teams that we named. This week we're all up on the West teams that we named, which is funny. I just think that kind of speaks to where the Western Conference and the Eastern Conference generally is. I'm up on the Warriors. I really enjoyed their offseason. I think I think we're going to look at their offseason as a success as long as we adjust the goalposts to something that is realistic and define what the real expectations for this team is. And this has nothing to do with what Warriors fans want. Obviously, they want to win a championship. But I do think even more important than that is letting Steph Curry compete. What was the thing he said at the end of the last season? He says, I just want to compete. Right? And I think you easily say, you can hear that and you say, oh, well, obviously he wants another ring. He wants to win a championship. Of course he does. But more than anything, I think the guy just wants to get it to the second round of the playoffs, have a chance to get to the Western Conference Finals. Like, this is a guy who needs these stakes. Him and Draymond both need high-level stakes to feel something, you know? And these guys just want to feel something. And last year, they obviously weren't able to get there. I think the roster right now, they lose Klay Thompson. That's the big headline. But they added a bunch of interesting guys, right? Some guys that were going to be on the All-NBA Twitter team and some guys who aren't, but some interesting guys like D'Anthony Melton, All-NBA Twitter team member. They add Buddy Hield, not, but a decent player. Kyle Anderson, All-NBA Twitter team member. And they still have all the young guys, and they obviously still have Steph. Steve Kerr has an assortment of options that he can go to with these lineups. We know he's going to experiment with them. There's going to be 20 different starting lineups this year for Steve Kerr, and it's going to be on purpose because he loves to experiment with this stuff. In pencil, I have Steph, Melton, Wiggins, Kuminga, and Draymond Green as my starting five for them. Maybe that's not it. Maybe they do start one of their real-ish centers. I don't think it matters all that much as long as they just find ways to get these guys to play. And by the way, they could still make a Lowry marketing deal. Like, we can still consider their offseason potentially incomplete here. But the idea that what Mike Dunleavy Jr. set out to do was he was never going to just pick up the thing that Bob Myers dropped when he left the room and just stand and just hold his soda for him. Like, that was never going to be what it was. It was a 2-year process of sort of reimagining and reshaping the roster to be more versatile, to be more flexible in a lot of different ways, payroll, asset-wise, all these things. It started with the Jordan Poole trade from last offseason. Get off that long-term deal. You get Chris Paul. You deal with that for a year. You get off of him. I thought it was the right move to just waive him. They did that. They didn't go after Klay Thompson. They let him walk. They created a ton of flexibility. They did all these sign-and trades and used the exception on Melton and all these things. And I think they have a more complete roster to show for it, and I think they have a roster that can conceivably get into the second round of the playoffs. And if Steph is doing Steph things in the playoffs, maybe this team, maybe we look up and they're in the Western Conference Finals. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. I don't think that this team has any chance of winning the championship. And I would say that even if they traded for Markkanen. I don't think that's like the needle-moving move that gets them to championship level with Oklahoma City and Denver and all these things. But I don't think that should be the expectation. For Steph Curry's last few years, it should be as many playoff games as possible that we get to watch Steph Curry play in. Everybody wins.
I do like, from that standpoint, the depth, just getting through the regular season more easily.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, when you're trying to find young players and develop them, you run the risk of having a guy in your 13th, 14th, 15th spot that just ends up giving you nothing, or in Moody's case, that the coach just doesn't like, or whatever's going on there. But with all these vets now, it's a little bit more, it's easier to just see them having an identity, rolling the ball out, winning games, and especially with the play-in and their checkered luck with that does matter. I think their offseason I'll only feel as good about it as you seem to if they do get the Markkanen thing done.
Yeah.
Especially because they have to at least start thinking about who's going to be on their team after Curry and Draymond are gone also. And I'm not saying that Markkanen would even be on that list of players or that he's good enough to be the best on that team, but he at least gives you if you lose those guys or they retire or whatever, well, then maybe you can trade Markkanen, and then it gives you more of a blueprint for that future rather than like what happens when Kuminga's the best player on a team. And I don't think anyone really feels awesome about that. So I like it for both of those reasons, even if you have to be the team to pay Markkanen and he's not some value, jackpot hit like Utah's gotten. I would even like him on a fair contract for that reason. But I also, this is off topic, but I want next episode your All-NBA Twitter first, second, and third
happening.
teams.
I will put that together. I would feel better about this offseason if they got Markkanen also, but that was sort of the point, is now they're in position to go make that trade or another trade if it's not Markkanen. They have the stuff to get this done. Would you guys trade Kuminga for Markkanen with like the other things? But would you the central question of I guess the reporting around this now is they're offering Moses Moody all the picks and then all the swaps, which by the way, those swaps would be the fakest swaps ever. Like Utah is going to be worse than Golden State. Like have all my swaps. It's fine.
It's a good press release win, Wes. That's what
exactly
you have to,
what it is.
That's what this is. It's a press
Danny
release
Ainge
win.
cares about anything. But
We debated it last week, and I think I would trade Kuminga for Markkanen. I also don't buy that, or we debated it 2 weeks ago. I also don't buy that Danny Ainge actually wants Podziemski more than Kuminga. I think that he's just playing leak games there. So
I would agree with you on that.
yeah.
Kuminga makes way more sense for Utah than Pods, and that would be the guy that I would want to take a swing on if I'm Utah.
Sure. So I would trade Kuminga.
I'm with you. And then that would sort of fill in that one thing is okay. Well, when Steph isn't scoring, then who is sort of the big question with this team because it's not Melton, it's not Healed. Maybe it's Pods if everything like if Joe Lacob saying that this guy's going to be a multi-time All-Star ends up being true, then hey, congrats.
It's been a great week to be Brandon Podziemski between Danny Ainge leaking that you're the crown jewel of the trade, and then your owner leaking that you're going to be a multi-time All-Star, and then just getting to like beat the shit out of people in summer league because you're too good to be there. It's just been a great week for Pods.
Better PR summer for Pods or Paul Mescal? Gladiator 2.
Chris question.
See, I know movies. Chris,
Paul,
just give me a name.
Pods. The Paul thing is not kicked in yet. It's going to be a better fall for Paul.
Oh, big fall for Paul. Time fall.
One of the other things I like about Markkanen, though, and even if you have to give up Kuminga, almost in place of Kuminga, is one of the things I like about Kuminga on this team is the kind of force and power that he plays with. And Markkanen actually does kind of have that, you know? Like he can drive, attack a closeout or cut or, you know, roll to the basket and
he's
use
big.
His body and be
He's 7
felt.
feet
And
tall.
his secondary rim protection is not terrible. He takes up space on defense. Like he does kind of make you a bigger, more physical team, even though we think of him as kind of a, you know, Euro finesse guy. He's not like, you know, Dario Saric or whatever your bad example would be.
And the other part of this too is as clunky as fitting Kuminga is on the roster now, I think it would be even harder to empower him if you had Markkanen on the roster with Kuminga. If you moved Pods instead, it's okay. We're going to take the ball out of his hands even more now. And it just feels like Kuminga is a guy who needs space. He needs something. He needs a lot of yard, and he needs to be able to explore it. And in Golden State, I never liked the fit in Golden State for him. I like Kuminga as a prospect. Always did. Always hated the fit in Golden State. I don't know that there was a worse team for him to get drafted to than the Warriors. And this is what it looked like, right? Is because they had a system that they needed their players to play in. And Kuminga, he was so raw and still is just so raw that it's like, well, what system do you fit him in? Because we're not even really sure what he's good at an elite NBA level right now. So it's hard to
It's like Cam Whitmore. It's kind of the Cam Whitmore conundrum. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but generally speaking, I really like what Mike Dunleavy Jr. has done, at least now, to position this team for whether it's Markkanen or that next thing. I also like Markkanen a lot, too, as a guy that you can trade for because he's a guy who fits other stars, whether it's with Steph or Draymond or where they leave and you still have Markkanen. It's just really easy to plug in another guy next to him and say, yep, that's going to fit because of the size and the shooting.
I want to go back to one thing you said, Wes, because it's kind of been where I'm at thinking about the Warriors more than anything else, and that is having to move the goalposts. It's real that, like, the best part of Kerr's career, like, championship window, I am 22, feels like it's probably the last real one.
Mm-hmm.
Something about that is just kind of, considering his legacy, considering his status as one of the best players of his generation of all time, that is true that is where, but part of me does not want to, like, do that. I don't want to do it for LeBron either. It's like those teams
It's different
are not
for LeBron, though. LeBron's chasing Jordan. Every year, every championship ring factors into the equation. Steph Curry, unless he wins 3 more championships between now and him retiring, he's never going to be on that level, right? And so with Steph, I don't think that the expectations for him at the end of his career are the same as LeBron. And I know a lot of people have made that comparison. Well, if we hold the Lakers and LeBron this accountable, and if we're so hard on them for not making big moves, why are we not that hard on the Warriors? It's like, because their best player isn't chasing the GOAT status, and these rings don't matter for him anymore.
Yeah, look, I think they just do matter. Like I think this whole thing is ultimately to win championships. This is what this is about. Steph Curry making the second round of the playoffs and us being like, well, you still plucky, you still can make it. Like,
would you feel different if Steph,
for me.
if the Warriors and Steph won the championship this year? Would you feel, and then Steph retired? Would you feel any different about Steph's career? No, I wouldn't.
No,
but if LeBron won a championship, now we're getting to the next
I don't know
equation with him and Jordan.
I don't know if I'd feel different about LeBron, but I'm also just a LeBron homer. Like that's just the reality for me. It's like I already think he's the best player of all time.
Well, then Brendon, would not the LeBron homer then?
The Bradley Beal homer.
I think I would feel differently about everybody. I mean, when Steph won the fourth one, we started having like top 10 all-time conversations,
that
best point guard ever conversations,
yes.
right? So, but what would another one do? I mean, it would just cement him at the very top of that, probably, right? I mean,
I suppose.
I hear
just
you though.
think
22, the nature of 22, it was kind of like Kobe's second two, right? It's like he did it without Shaq. Curry got another one after the dynasty. Kind of all of that was real. Right. I'm the guy. This was our foundation. It won again. So there wouldn't be like a story to this title if for somehow Markkanen just launched them into championship status or they did something else to get there. But I think everybody would benefit. I mean, you know, we're tiptoeing very close to a Kevin Durant legacy conversation, so I'd like to stay away from that. But
that's next week. Brendon.
All these older guys, I still think it matters. I do.
I just also think this is in this sport, in the way we talk about sports, the goal is win a championship. That's the goal. And first, I guarantee you, if we asked Steph Curry, is making the second round like good enough for you, he would tell you no.
He would tell you no. That's part of it, though, right? Like I think it's because he's quiet, and we think everything is so charmed with the Warriors that I think we do they do avoid the scrutiny a little bit of that type of like good at it. That pressure. Yeah.
Yeah.
He would tell you no. I think in his heart of hearts, I think the guy just wants to feel like he has a chance. Whether or not they do or not, whether or not they ultimately win a championship or even play in another finals again. It's just been every year that wasn't 2022, basically since 2019, has just been a year without a chance. Like, I think just everybody, and that's why, like, this is a personal question. Like, what teams' off seasons are you personally higher or lower than? I'm higher on the Warriors because I think this puts them in a position, or really, frankly, it puts me in a position to watch Steph Curry play playoff games again in a 7-game series, like real playoff games. Yeah, and that's all I want. That's all I want from the Warriors off seasons and the Warriors going forward and the rest of Steph Curry's. That's all I personally want.
I will say I think where I ultimately am with this is I'm aligned with Brendon that if they traded for Markkanen tomorrow, I think that I'm there. That's like all the other stuff on the fringes is good. I think Buddy Hield's going to be like dangerous as hell for that team. Mm-hmm. But I think if they get Markkanen, I that would be there, and you know, because I mean, there's just still some internal stuff there. It's like, is anyone ever going to get Andrew Wiggins to play like competent basketball again? Like,
well, they might get the every other year Wiggins thing going, which would be a benefit for them based on last year. So
yeah, would be good. But I think I sentimentally agree, Wes. But I also just
I'll take that as a win then. I'll take that as an agree.
All right, we've crossed the aisle and made some deals. Brendon, you had the WNBA All-Star game in your backyard this weekend. Not in your physical backyard, but in your city.
Not big enough. I don't have one.
Okay. Let's start here. You texted us the other day. The first thing we heard from you this weekend was you went to a podcast recording hosted by Megan Rapinoe and Sue Bird. That the guests were Paige Beckers and Aubrey Plaza. How was that? What was the energy at this podcast recording? What was discussed?
Oh, it was cool. Friday morning, I went to the launch of the Unrivaled League that they're doing in Miami in January with like all of the best players in the league. Apparently set up to make a whole lot of money. We'll see on that.
I saw the figures and was like, whoa, okay.
Yeah. Significantly more than they make in the WNBA would be what the numbers are. But that was cool. Brianna Stewart and Nafisa Collier are involved there, and there seems to be a lot of energy there. That was cool. And then I went to the podcast recording. It was personally for me, I have to admit that one of the better elements of it is my physical proximity to Jason Sudeikis during this event. I was within, touching distance if I had wanted to of Mr. Sudeikis, who has become a women's basketball fanboy and was at everything this weekend. Paige Beckers.
He's been at everything for months, really. It's been like quite fun to just like you just look around and there's like Sudeikis in a New York Liberty colored WNBA hoodie.
He was
like
at all the Caitlin games.
T-shirt.
He was at all the be nice to just make so much money that you can just follow around a thing you like for a year. I'm open to those possibilities if anybody has connections on that. So yeah, it was cool. Paige Beckers is going to be the real deal. Everything that it's not going to be quite as pronounced, obviously, for reasons we've all yelled about for a year now with Caitlin, but everything it feels like with Caitlin this year, it just feels like it's going to be Paige next year. She can handle it already. There was a tweet going viral that she's the only WNBA player not in the WNBA yet, and I was like, yeah, from a talent standpoint and just like a poise standpoint and a fame standpoint, it's like it feels like she's already here. We just have to send her out to like the rural Northeast for another year before we actually get to really experience it all. And then honestly, all my takeaways are mainly from the game yesterday. It was just awesome. I don't know if you guys watched,
dude.
But
I watched it I watched a big chunk of it in a bar in Athens, Ohio, which had a good time. But Arike absolutely cooked, and that was incredible.
So it was better than the men's All-Star game.
wasn't even close.
Is there? Excuse my ignorance here. Is there a difference in like the way that it's structured? Is there, or is it just the?
Well, yeah, this year because it was Team USA versus the WNBA All-Stars, so it was a tune-up game. The same as South Sudan and Serbia and whatnot have been for the men's team. The women's team, this is their first time playing together, and then they're playing against not like it's so cutthroat, but in theory like 12 All-Stars from the W who kind of maybe think they should have gone on Team USA. So it was very very competitive in that way, and Team USA lost. For the second straight Olympics, Team USA lost in the All-Star game to the other All-Stars, and yeah, it was cool to see them. It was kind of cool to see the conversation post-game was just locking in and getting the mentality straight. But to hear this Team USA is a very transitional one, and Brianna Stewart and Asia Wilson kind of stepping up and talking about themselves as leaders of this team was just odd. I'm like, I think I'm about the same age as you guys. How are you like the wizened vets on the Olympic team for the sport you play? That feels insane, but that's kind of where it's at. Diana Taurasi one last run, but a lot of the other older players who were around even in 2021 are gone. And just the Caitlin show came to town again, which was crazy. I mean, she played the Mercury once like a month ago, so I already had the taste of it, but I don't know how she does it. I don't know how she handles all the attention. It's insane to see up close just how much it all is.
What?
That's it. I don't have any other great stories. I'm sorry.
Well, no. The All-Star Week. Here's the thing. I think because we've all been NBA All-Star Weekend, or like big NBA events. Yeah. So, but you guys have been to the. I've went to the one in Cleveland. I know we've all covered like deep playoff runs and been around that stuff.
Yeah.
There is a certain point where like, yes, there are like a lot of people around, but everyone is so preoccupied with what is going on that there often aren't like just random things that happen. It's just you sort of like look around. And it's like, oh, there's Jason Sudeikis. Oh, there's some Kardashians. Oh, the Bryants. I know the Bryants were at that game on Sunday. All-Star Weekend in particular. I think what I liked about it, Brendon, was the fact that just timing-wise, it worked out that USA Basketball needed like a tune-up game and got to do this, and that there was like a little bit of competitiveness and chippiness to it. Like Kelsey Plum guarding full court, like. Yes, there was still a little bit of the, hey, we're not going to play so hard so no one gets hurt and all of that factor into it. And a little bit of just Arike literally just catching fire and it being kind of her showcase. But there was just like a little bit of, I think, like real kind of juice to it because of the timing of it. Whereas in the NBA, it's like you get to the middle of the season and everyone's just like trying to get out of their city and saying go to Cancun for 2 days.
Asia basically said post-game, she was asked, like, can we expect more of the same or whatever? And she was like, no, we did this because we need to get ready for the Olympics. Next year it will be exactly like the men's and not very competitive. So get ready for that. Like she just said it.
I'm glad that you had a good time, it sounds like, at All-Star, because you asked the question, Chris, about covering All-Star. I have not covered All-Star in 4 or 5 years now on purpose. I hate it. It sucks as a weekend. It sucks as a media person covering it. You're just being sold brands. Everything has a logo on it. It's not really for anybody. It's not for the players. It's not even really for the fans anymore because everything is so heavily branded. It's for the brands. That's what All-Star Weekend is for, and I don't need to help them do that. So it sounds like, Brendon, you had a very different experience, and I'm glad the WNBA All-Star game was at least an enjoyable weekend for you.
I mean, a lot of it's still in the infancy, so yes, it's heavily branded and everything, but I think that there is a little bit of like, hey, it's cool that there is the branding,
Right.
But I mean, along those lines, Caitlin not doing the 3-point contest and the skills competition got a lot of attention, and that was interesting to me. And a lot of people were like, she just needs a break. She doesn't want to have to be on a basketball court. And like that was kind of the joke she was making all season or all weekend. But I think she really just wanted to have the spotlight be on other people. I think it was very deliberate to say, this is not my weekend. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I'm not coming in to take the show to Phoenix and keep all the spotlight on me. I thought it was pretty cool of her to, I'm sure the league asked. I'm sure she could have won it, probably would have won it or, whatever. But she was just sitting courtside like all of the rest of the people. And I think that was a cool kind of like, olive branch from her to just say, I'm just here. I'm just one of the people here. You know what I mean?
Piece in our time was her getting an assist to Angel Reese in that game as well. Like we really just all came.
They were loving
together.
it. They in the practice. They were hyping it up, and yeah, they were having fun with it. That perhaps the media has overblown that particular dynamic. Just potentially. I'm not. I'm not going to say one way or the other.
Wes, to your point, I will agree with you. I lucked out for the year I had All-Star Weekend here. It was the 75. Also NBA top 75 team reveal. So I just got to see like a bunch of legends in person. That was the only thing from All-Star Weekend that I like ultimately like cared about. It was cool. It was in my seat. It's cool. I got to like see a bunch of people, but like a lot of the interviews you get asked, you get opportunities you were branded. It was just cool to see the history component of that. Everything else was like, that Saturday night was generally one of the worst All-Star Saturday nights ever. And I sat there for 3 hours. Like, why am I doing this? Like, what am I doing?
I only had 2 good All-Star experiences in my life. The first one I'll tell you was actually the one that happened second. I was able to successfully sneak into the player hotel, which I probably shouldn't be saying, but you know what? Statute of limitations has probably expired on that one.
Did you commit actual crime, or did you you just went into the hotel? It's
no,
like
they had security outside. It was like a TSA airport, and you had to have certain like credentials and stuff to get in, and I talked my way into the building, and I just, for no other reason, I didn't end it. Once I was in the building, I left the building. I just wanted to see if I can get in, and then I did. So
should have at least had like a
story to
drink
tell on
at
a
the bar.
podcast.
Yeah.
And now my favorite All-Star Weekend story was in New Orleans. They've had 2 in New Orleans relatively recently, within like the last 8 years or so. I think they've had 2. It was the first one in New Orleans, so not the most recent one. And I was at a entertainment facility in New Orleans, and not far from me was Charles Barkley, and I was smoking a cigar, not with Charles Barkley, but around Charles Barkley, right? And not
It's the same way that I was at that event with Jason Sudeikis.
Correct. Yes, in the very much same way. And it was just sort of cool to be like, oh, me and Charles Barkley are kind of doing the same thing right now. That's kind of fun.
You and Spo have a lot in common. You and Chuck have a lot in common. You're one of the.
I would say I have more. I would hope I end up having more in common with Spo, but I will take. You know what? I'll take the Charles Barkley
Early
broadcast
retirement
career.
though.
Yeah.
Early retirement.
I'd take that from Barkley right now.
Yeah. I'll take the broadcast career.
Probably a little less stressed out.
Take the Emmys.
Yeah.
I don't hear Spo going to entertainment facilities.
I think Charles Barkley probably has a higher quality of life in terms of how much he enjoys his life than Eric Spoelstra. Although Eric Spoelstra is doing exactly what he wants to be doing, so who knows?
Yeah, but I think there's a different scale. It's like one guy's getting to just kind of vibe and hang out and like golf, and one guy's like probably sleeping 4 hours a night and driving himself mad about how to like guard Joel Embiid. Yeah, it's true.
You know, Eric Spoelstra on a golf course, he would be like, I should be game planning for something.
Yeah, gotta go, guys. I'm gonna play 9 today. I gotta go crush some tape.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, Phoenix has All-Star for the NBA in 2 years after the Clippers have it next year, and I don't need to go to any that aren't here. I think you guys are right. Like, it's fun.
Luckily,
it's
Miami
cool.
will never have it.
I had an awful headache all morning because I was awake for too long this weekend and had not even that much to drink last night, but apparently it was not good for me. So the weekend kicked my ass, and I don't need to travel for it if you guys are telling me it's not worth it. So I'm just keep them coming.
I would say if people were ever to go to like a random like NBA event or WNBA event, the one that I think is the most fun because it's partially because it's accessible to just watch a bunch of basketball is Summer League.
Yep.
That is
I tell
that
people
is
all the time. Do Summer League.
great.
Do that.
Go to Summer League.
Skip All-Star.
Especially as a fan, like forget media.
Yeah.
As a fan,
Yes.
you pay like $50 face value, and if you really care to watch, you're getting like 4 or 5 games. You just
With
sit
great
there.
seats.
You're closer than you'll ever
Yep.
be to watch those guys ever again.
Yeah.
Can't be.
Like if your team has a cool rookie coming in, go to Summer League that year and like watch them play. And it'll be
Especially if
really
they
cool.
play in the Cox Pavilion. That's like a
Yeah.
high school gym. It's
Yeah.
like you're never getting that type of close up with an NBA player. You're not even getting that close for college.
No, not even close. But we're gonna end there. I'm Chris Manning. That's Brendon Kleen. That is Wes Goldberg. Back at you later this week with more Just Basketball. Have a great week, everyone. We'll talk to you soon.